The story of a man named Tommy Norman was no different from millions of other stories. He grew up in a small town in Arkansas, not far from its capital, Little Rock. Like many young people, Norman didn't have any direction or great career aspirations at the time. He worked as an orderly in a hospital and provided for his beloved family. Later, he worked as a volunteer for the Big Brothers NGO. And overall, he tried to serve the society in which he lived. And perhaps we might have never learned this man's name if it wasn't for a thought that came to the 26-year-old Tommy on one beautiful day. A thought that changed his whole life. Of course, like any normal person, Tommy wanted to help people. But at that point, he didn't even think about a career in the police force. He didn't think about it until he turned 26. The youngest of 9 children, he eventually decided to apply to the North Little Rock Police Department, and to his surprise, he got accepted and even successfully graduated from the academy. But the most interesting part came later. On his very first day, Tommy Norman was patrolling the streets of that same North Little Rock, as a good cop is supposed to. Then suddenly, he saw a group of children quickly get up and run into the house nearby when they spotted the police car a few hundred meters away. This seemed a little odd to the young police officer, so he decided to stop and ask what scared them so much. He slowly walked up to the house and took a look around before cautiously knocking on the door. A woman's voice answered from the other side, saying that everything was fine. So Tommy asked why they were running away, to which the woman replied, "They didn't do anything wrong, they're just children." These words alerted him even more. "Did they run away from me?" Norman asked the question confused. "Please open the door. I just want to talk to them." The door opened a few seconds later, and Tommy said, "Ma'am, I have only one purpose here, to help every resident of this neighborhood that might need my help." After that, he joked a little with the children and parted with them in a good mood. As it turned out, the polite behavior of the new patrol officer surprised the local woman very much. Unfortunately, people in this neighborhood were used to something very different. Tommy's first days on the job were very difficult, to say the least. Wherever he went, people would either leave the place or pretended they weren't even there. Many of the local residents were surprised to see this strange new cop hanging around on their streets all the time, as they were used to only seeing cops when it was already dark outside. It was tough on Tommy as well. My mother used to call me every 2 hours, asking the same question. "Tommy, are you okay there? Are you really safe?" No matter how old you get, a mother always worries about her child. And my mother is no different, Tommy later said. Our hero didn't want to share the fate of all the other guys in the uniform that came before him, so he made a decision. He realized that in order to become a successful police officer, he needed the local residents to trust him. People that have the most valuable information for the police are often the same people that least trust them. It takes years to gain such trust, but losing it can take a few seconds. So he decided that he wouldn't be just another police officer, but rather became an integral part of this place. He took on a rather unusual approach. Unlike anything his predecessors did, he only let himself be guided by justice, thus ensuring safety of all local residents. The first situation that happened to Norman was very indicative. A man named Willie was arrested for stealing copper pipes from an old house. Norman wasn't the one who detained him, but when he learned of the incident that took place in his district, he decided to have a talk with Willie. As it turned out, the man was only stealing pipes because he couldn't afford to pay rent. Thus, even though Willie clearly should have been arrested, he didn't commit a crime after all. Tommy decided to give him a chance. He talked to Willie for a long time, told him about other ways to earn money, ones that didn't involve breaking the law. But he actually did more than just talk. "I just thought that if we put him in prison, it won't make his debt go away. So when he gets out, he's still going to be deep in debt. So who will benefit from this? He'd still have to go and steal something. So I decided to help him pay off his debt." Tommy made a post on social network where he wrote about his problem and the man's situation. To his surprise, the very next day, he received a check from the locals to help Willie pay off his debts. Norman took the money and paid off Willie's debt. When he showed Willie the receipt and explained what had happened, Willie couldn't hold back his tears and cried like a baby. And then he even hugged the officer. "I couldn't even imagine something like this happening," Willie later said. And that was actually the end to this situation. The story spread around the entire district in just an hour. People couldn't really understand what it was, but they did appreciate it. By the way, it's been 17 years since this strange cop came to this neighborhood. In all these years, Tommy didn't just become one of them. He became something so much more. something this neighborhood wouldn't seem complete without. He had done so much for so many members of this community that the stories about him could be told for days. But unfortunately, it's impossible to remember all he did in those 17 years. For example, he once saw a barefoot boy while driving past his house, so he asked the boy why he wasn't wearing shoes, and the answer was very simple. He didn't have any. Tommy knocked on the door of his house, where he lived with his mother and siblings. He just asked for the shoe size of the boy and the rest of the kids. The surprised woman answered, and the next day, she got several pairs of new shoes. But that's not all. He bought a new jacket for the boy next door, who was always waving at him and standing outside in just a sweater. He met Gloria, a former drug addict and a homeless person, when he was walking down a street late at night. She worked and lived in a rented apartment nearby, but when Tommy asked how she was doing, she told him that it was 3 years to the day since she quit using drugs. So the police officer took her to dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate this important day in her life. He encouraged her, and they even danced jigga. But that still isn't all. A young couple, Deborah and Jay, were forced to move around a lot because of their financial difficulties, as well as eat at soup kitchens. When asked by the realtor about where they wanted to find housing, they gave a surprising reply. "We can move anywhere, as long as it's within the neighborhood that Tommy Norman is responsible for." As it turned out, they moved around a lot, but they always chose to stay in the Norman Patrol area because they felt safe there. Tommy even was the best man at their wedding. This place now serves as an example to other police officers. When the patrol officers drive through the neighborhood, everyone greets him, and the kids waiting for the school bus look out for him impatiently because they know that he can make a show for them. He once gathered the kids and sang for them. The other time he danced for them on the street. He often takes them to school or brings them home. Tommy doesn't care that kids often laugh at him when he doesn't know all the dance moves or when they think he looks silly. He also doesn't discriminate by age. There are many videos on the internet where he's dancing with his colleagues as well as the elderly people of his neighborhood. All those videos have one thing in common. People in them are always smiling. According to Norman, he has to deal with many difficult realities. Many children waiting at the bus stop come from households that can't even afford breakfast. So one of the first questions Norman always asks is whether anyone is hungry. Many children were embarrassed to tell him at first, but they learned to trust him. "It's not hard for me after all. They're the future of our neighborhood. I live here with them, and therefore I always have a lot of juice and cake in the trunk." And when the kids get back from school, they all quickly go home and do their homework as soon as possible, because the police officer Tommy Norman will come later to read them a story. Yes guys, our hero always has books with him in the car. Children usually consider reading to be boring, but Norman teaches them to enjoy it. By making his readings fun, he makes them laugh and even gives them homework, and everyone always does it. As Tommy Norman says, the fastest way out of poverty is through education and dreams, and it is the books that give you both. I'd rather point them in the right direction in their lives than be forced to arrest them later. By the way, there have been much less arrests in the area. The crime rate has decreased, mainly because many locals, even the most criminally inclined, refrain from doing something bad because they would be embarrassed to look Tommy in the eyes. But friends, even despite the fact that today, Norman is a friend to a bigger part of the neighborhood population, and children love to play with him, they even locked him in his car once, there still exists a different kind of reality. In one of the interviews, Tommy told about something horrible that has recently happened in the area. Many years ago, I met a boy named Tupac. This boy would always smile and wave at me at first, and run to meet me. He was a sweet boy. I even carried him on my shoulders and let him sit on my lap behind the wheel in my car. But as he got older, I saw him start turning away each time I drove by. Soon, the boy didn't want to have anything to do with me. I tried talking to him, but he would always avoid me. He would later get involved with a bad company and begin to make wrong decisions. He was killed on the streets a few months back, Tommy tells, tearing up. It was twice as hard for him because he had 2 kids of his own, 21 and 23 years old, and Tupac was also their age. The story of a kind police officer became public in 2015 when rapper Killer Mike told reporters about him. "I only know one person who deserves to be imitated, and it's Tommy Norman, the patrol officer from North Little Rock." But his real fame came a bit later, when another hip-hop star, The Game, with his eldest son Harlem, created a GoFundMe campaign featuring Norman. Now, there are several homeless assistance centers and volunteer centers that operate with the help of our patrol officer. Thanks to their work, many families are well-dressed and no longer hungry. It is thanks to his efforts that many desperate people who were already at the bottom of the social pyramid now live in their own houses, have started families, and even own businesses. Officer Tommy Norman has appeared on CNN and The Today Show on numerous occasions and has been recognized by many NGOs for his hard work. He inspired people from New York, Pennsylvania, Utah, and other places who decide to follow in his footsteps. But more importantly, he inspires other officers around the world to follow his example. He once said, "In order for there to be less shooting and more order on the street, each officer just needs to get out of their car and actually walk the street. They need to talk to the people and become part of their neighborhood. When you become one of their own, become an example of what life can be like, they start trusting you." So that's who the police officer Tommy Norman is. The person that once appeared on these streets and didn't just bring order, but also changed the lives of its residents for the better. And all this simply because he cared. So, friends, what do you think about this man's actions? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments section. Well, that's it for today. Rate this video if you liked it, and see you soon. Bye.